friends. This is another episode of the program Empire of Lies, in which we discuss manipulation and disinformation in the Russian media. Russia declares the end of the world. There is no room left for ambiguity in the Russian media landscape. The last broadcasts of Vladimir Solovyov, who once claimed to be the loud voice of the patriotic camp, now sound like a chronology of the militarization of consciousness. This is no longer propaganda in the traditional sense, not a play on slogans and emotions, but a consistent explanation that war has become the only acceptable language of Russian politics. What was long perceived in Europe as exotic theatre has become a script for action. In the program, Russia effectively bids farewell to the idea of negotiations and forges a new ideological narrative. Peace is weakness, and negotiations are a tool of the enemy. 1. From Anchorage to Pinochet, a symbolic break on air, Solovyov approvingly quotes the statement of Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov: "The resource of peace negotiations has been exhausted." This isn't a diplomatic remark, but an ideological divide. The studio isn't discussing how to resume dialogue, it's discussing how to live without it. Then comes the key passage. In the future, power in Ukraine could be changed not by elections, but by bayonet, as it was under Pinochet. The direct reference to a military coup isn't perceived as a threat, on the contrary, as a possible path to stability. The rhetoric is built around the idea that democracy is inimical to the very logic of war, and that governability can be maintained even with a violent change of power. This logic is dangerous not only for Ukraine, it turns force into a universal language of politics, depriving negotiations and compromises of their moral status. 2. The new theatre of war, Central Europe. The second focus of the broadcast is a shift in military attention to Poland, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and the Baltics. There, the programme's participants claim a militarization of consciousness is growing. The majority of Poles surveyed are supposedly ready to shoot down Russian planes. This is presented as proof that Europe is drawn into war and no longer in control of its own escalation. In this construction, Poland is no longer an ally of the West, but a second front, soft-bodied but ambitious, striving to become a regional leader with the blessing of the US and UK. Thus, Russian media rhetoric preemptively justifies the possibility of conflict not only with Ukraine, but also with NATO's eastern flank. This creates a psychological space where a military clash with Europe no longer seems impossible. 3. The Balkans, as a mirror of the future Solovyev, then moves the conversation to Belgrade, to an international arms exhibition. There, he says, all attention is focused on drones, air defense systems, and new military technologies. Russia, China, and Iran, as alternative centers of power, are demonstrating their systems, while Serbia is portrayed as Russia's last outpost in Eastern Europe. However, behind this pride, fear is audible. Even in Serbia, the presenter admits all the TV channels belong to the West. In response, there is a call to show off, even to the point of demonstrating nuclear tests, so they stop scaring us. The nuclear threat here is not hyperbole. It is the gradual lifting of taboos. When live television discusses where to point the finger for a strike, the rhetoric turns into moral preparation of society for the idea that a nuclear warning is permissible. Well, today, in my view, Ryabkov's statement was significant, saying that the potential for peace talks, which was held in Anchorage a couple of months ago, has been exhausted. I think it's a symbolic and significant statement. This is confirmed by the actions of some countries, which we speak of with a certain sympathy, including the FEC and Slovakia. which in principle support the initiative, as it's written in local publications, supporting, in a sense, jumping on the last train that's spending money on defense so as not to be left on a siding. So Slovakia too has decided that it needs to profit from the war and sell its mine-clearing equipment and other ammunition. So even Slovakia, in this regard, has taken the path of militarization. Clearly, these are the consequences of the United States' actions to date, their complete rejection of peace negotiations. I believe that what we postponed for 2 months is now being actively pursued by the United States and Europe, as they say, in lockstep and moving in the same direction. Therefore, I understand that, as of today, the Deputy Foreign Minister's statement, along with a specific section, states that discussions about peace are probably no longer relevant, although it's not without reason that my colleagues and I have been speaking about possible options for this particular bloc. 4. A new geopolitical picture. The world has ended, the reckoning begins. All these episodes are connected by a single idea. Negotiations are pointless. War is natural. The West is accused of profiting from the conflict, Eastern Europe of selling itself for pennies, Serbia of not being loyal enough, and Russia of not yet demonstrating its true power. This is precisely what the European reader needs to understand. We are not dealing with the improvisation of TV presenters, but with state logic being imprinted on the mass consciousness through the screen. This isn't about the media. It's about building a public consensus for a long war, about turning nuclear rhetoric and hatred into the norm. This was the program Empire of Lies. See you soon.